California prison system. I spoke to the California political Black Caucus. I spoke at high schools and elementary schools, you know, dealing with, you know, the cause of gang activity and how they can stifle it or control it. They didn't pay no attention because gang activity is money.
Right.
You know.
Say you can't find no Crip of blood that's over 66. You know, and most of them are 65 and under.
Right.
You know, you had basically the farmers were the most known Watts tribe, you know, at that particular time, going back to the late 50s and the early 60s. It was the farmers. But you had Dartalians, you had Servalians, you had Huns, you know, and you know, as the same as Slauson, you had a lot of different tribes within the Watts area.
Were you fighting or not fighting all these other groups?
Well, at times you had disputes. Major fights such as Crips and Bloods and different neighborhoods, as you have had in the last 30 years, no, we did not. You know, we participated in a lot of parties together and so on and so forth. It was always a disrespect aspect when it became some type of conflict. But as it is now today, and as youth across the United States participate in gang activity, you know, it's very petty, it's unnecessary, it's self-destructive, you know what I'm saying? And it's just what America wants to happen. You know, we were aware of that at that particular time.
You mentioned the avenues. They came out in '67, and as far as I know, according to Craig Munson, they disbanded in '69. The avenues, I mean, can you kind of like give me some insight? Were they more like Crips and Bloods or more like Slausons and businessmen?
Well, at that particular time, the avenues was located off of Hooper in the 80s. We basically were all Slausons between Slauson and Manchester, or 87th and Slauson, between Figueroa and Hooper, Figueroa and Alameda. When they began to be avenues, I was in the federal penitentiary for about robbing banks. I do not know for a fact, you know, how they even started.
So you were in the penitentiary before the Crips and Bloods started coming?
Yes, I was, yeah. The Slauson Assassins, when I left, was still participating within Slauson Village. I was the leader and an organizer and the creator of the Slauson Assassins. But I discontinued gang activity in the year of 1965. The Assassins went on in 66, 67, 68, just before the Crips began.
Once the Crips are ushered in and you had some type of concern for the youth, give me a little bit about how you got involved with the youth.
Well, when I came out of prison in 1971, Bunchy had wrote me before his assassination, and he was talking about a reunion and how to try to unite these youth in a manner which they were beginning to go into, which was self-destruction again, which was a hardcore tribalism activity. When I came home, Bunchy was already assassinated, so therefore I went back into the underworld. At that particular time, they used to have a show called the Stan Borman Regis Philbin show. It was called Tempo on Channel 9. And I used to listen to it, and people used to call in and talk about it and criticize gang activity in Los Angeles. So when I called up, I told them who I was and what I represented and the knowledge that I had. So they invited me to come on the show and speak. So that was my first appearance on TV speaking about gang activity, was in 1971, 72. And I went on there twice. Bird and Crook, you know, came on there, but they wouldn't let them come on. They only allowed me to come on and speak. And at that particular time, it was a lieutenant from LAPD. It was a sister who was in the Board of Education, and they were talking about the participation of gangs in the LA school district. And I was trying to explain to them the origin of the gangs and how they promoted gang activity without even having knowledge that they were promoting it.
Tell me how your reunions came about, when they started.
Okay, when I was incarcerated in Marion Federal Penitentiary, Betsy and Wolf used to write me. This is the article here indicating how they used to write me and tell me about how the gang activity was coming about and how it was being stipulated by the establishment and how they was promoting gang activity without even the youth knowing what was being promoted or implemented upon them. So what I did when I came home, I began to speak to a lot of youth about why and what reason they were doing what they were doing. So consequently, after I came home, gang activity was still being a major participation. I'm just ad-libbing right now. When Bunchy wrote me, what they were indicating was about how the youth had went astray and they wasn't listening to them anymore. You know, and they were trying to, the Panther Party here in LA was trying to stop them from going into activity that was self-destructive, that was being infiltrated by the establishment and promoting them so they wouldn't go into revolutionary activity.
1972, the first annual picnic, did you answer that?
Okay, 1972, when I moved to Hollywood when I got out of the federal penitentiary, and because of what Bunchy and Wolf had wrote and told me, I began to promote the first organized Slauson reunion. That took place at my apartment in Hollywood in 1972, where revolutionary activity was being promoted, and we had banners of Black Panther Party members and Bunchy, and we established an understanding where we was going to go out in the youth and try to promote them to be constructive and not self-destructive. That's the first participation of Slauson, other than the Black Panther Party, into the youth gang activity in Los Angeles.
Are you familiar with the Long Table that the city of Los Angeles
Yes,
had?
yeah. I participated in a Long Table in 1972.
Who arranged that? Was that the mayor that did that, or what?
I think it was a conglomerate of individuals that really was not really for the youth, but wanted the publicity and was trying to seek materialistic gain. They had no influence.
All of them?
Most of them. I didn't see none, and I had just come home from federal prison. I really didn't see. All I seen was dollar signs that they were trying to obtain. To tell you the truth.
Yeah, I heard a few people were at that table just to represent their neighborhood and collect a check. Mm-hmm. But from my understanding, Raymond participated when he came home in '75. A few founders of other gangs that started while you were gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you come back, between '71 and '73, a lot of new gangs sprung up. So was there any other, during this era, when you came home, was there any big names that stood out in Crips and Bloods that you may have wanted to talk to or you had influence on?
Well, Tookie and Raymond was basically the only ones. I did not have that much conversation with Bloods, Swans. I was, as I said before, I was in the underworld and I was participating in other activity, but they were always at the back of my mind because I felt that the Assassins, when they ended, promoted all of this, and most of these youngsters was like 12, 13 years old when the Assassins disbanded. In 1975, I was in Tehachapi, and you had a lot of BGF members that would, at that particular time, they come down from posts in San Quentin that was in Tehachapi in 1976 and 77. Well, at that particular time, I was Black Mafia. But Black Mafia was like a brothership with the BGF. And these are pictures here of, I was the first black inmate council starter in Tehachapi back in 1976, where you had an organization of Hispanics and Mexicans and whites that tried to keep the violence and keep an understanding with the establishment of the prison system. And these are pictures that were taken back there in 1976. A lot of them are dead or deceased now. And that's almost 50 years ago.
So you had a lot of people in the prison system looked up to you for advice then.
Well, when I went back to prison in 1982, the Crips were just beginning to be, and Bloods were just beginning to be, a large section of the California prison system. They were naive and they were victims of a lot of influence that caused them to do more time as they were in the prison system. And they used to call me Uncle Lafayette, and I used to give them a lot of advice as far as the games and the tricks that the California correctional institutions were playing on them. And they gave me a lot of respect for this. So that's when I got the title of Uncle Lafayette, the Slauson Uncle Lafayette, among Crips and Bloods. I stopped a lot of activity among Crips and Bloods that was destructive and self-destructive within the California prison system.
When the Crips started hitting the system, did they start changing the program?
Basically, going back in history, you had Northern California blacks and Southern California blacks that sometime was at odds, unless it was racial. But when Crips and Bloods began to come in the California prison system, it was kind of like ridiculous because they were flaring up everywhere because of LA or San Diego conflicts that they were having and stuff. So the administration was using that against them, basically, to keep them in array, you know, when in actuality, that was stopping them from coming together and forming any kind of unisons. And that's how they kept them at bay. And they did it for years. They did it in the LA County system, county jail, and then they began to do it in the prison system.
And Tracy, when did the Crips start springing up?
To my knowledge, 1970, 72, 73, 74 is when they begin to spring into Tracy, Soledad, San Quentin, and eventually Folsom. I was in Folsom in the 80s, and they had took over Folsom. But I was in Folsom way before the 80s, and there was no Crips in there.
Right.
Not at all.
Right. And so the Crips formed, or attempted to form some
CCO.
Right.
Yeah.
CCO.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a certain amount of participation in that as far as organization is concerned.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. There was a lot of different groups
Yeah.
that looked to you for, and apparently it may have helped in the system, but not out here in the streets, right?
Well, in the system, it did to a degree as far as them being aware of the system and how the system was manipulating, but it was too many numbers. It was too many.
Too many.
Yeah, too many.
So you can't really have just one leader when you got thousands of people.
No. You have to have one ideal. And they did not have one ideal. Some of them were cultural, some of them were revolutionary, some of them were still locked into tribalism. So that's how the LA county jail and the California prison system kept them intact, in control, and kept them fighting against each other, as they do today. Not on a major scale, but they're still doing it.